First off, thanks so much to everybody for joining the webinar series. This is the second in our series. We're going to have two more to follow. And the one we had 3 weeks prior, I just wanted to send a quick thanks to both Adam and Ken from University of Oregon and Michigan State for presenting on that webinar. And the video of that is live for anyone who missed it and would like to see it, and we'll have a link to it at the end of the session. But this week, really excited to have Jade Freeman with us from Michigan State, Jim Nelson from Harvard, and also Rich, a colleague of mine from Esri. And we're going to be talking about bringing GIS indoors. So what it means to move GIS from kind of outdoor management to start to have indoor space management and optimization. So first off, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions at all, please just drop them into the chat box. We have myself, we have Angie, we have some others that are monitoring the questions. They can get right back to you. And also, if we're not able to get to the question, we'll get to it and send a response back to you personally after the webinar. Microphones will be muted throughout the session, so the chat box will be the way to get any communication to us. The 3 weeks back, we kind of struggled with time management, and so the Q&A got cut a little short. We're going to work to get some more time to ensure that there is more time for questions and that exchange of ideas between everybody, which was really valuable last time. The webinar and the slides will be available in a few days. We'll share the link of where all that stuff is going to get pushed to. And there's also a survey following the webinar. When you close out of the webinar, a survey will be presented to you. And please fill out those questions, give us some feedback. Honestly, we changed up some of the format of this session based on the feedback we received last time. So any ideas or content or things you'd like to see, just put that into the webinar, into that survey, and it'll help guide us for the next sessions going forward. So here's the outline we're going to be walking through today. A very quick introduction on the topic of indoor GIS, followed by two presenters that we pulled in from the community, Jade Freeman from Michigan State and Jim Nelson from Harvard. Going to be talking through what they've done with indoor GIS over the past few years, and specifically with some of the Esri technology that they've got in-house. Followed by Jade and Jim, we're going to have Rich Simpson talk through some of the updates that are coming to Arcgis Indoors specifically. A couple of really neat new tools that have been released and also coming down the road. Go over a couple of resources that are available, the links to all of this material, and lastly, some more time for some Q&A. So as a brief introduction, for those that have been mapping and managing and using GIS, you can see here we've got a lot of assets or a lot of things mapped outside of the building footprint. There's trees, we've got the pond, we've got sidewalks, roads, a fence line. You know, you've been managing and mapping those things outside of interior space for a long time now, and that's been kind of the area of GIS and one of its strengths. But honestly, and part of this webinar is the power of starting to bring GIS indoors. So not only mapping your rooms, your facilities, your buildings, but starting to actually put information related to people or assets, and this ability to not only visualize that information at the building level, but then be able to zoom out and see it at an entire campus level. So taking Revit or CAD information and starting to bring it into GIS so that you can have this one space that spatially is able to visualize and query and represent everything. And it's not only just for that static view, it can also start to pull in real-time information, operational layers. So it's this spot where people can go and then you can tie in from other systems, which is also part of what Ken and Adam talked about last week. So I want to make sure that this conversation is not just tied to ArcGIS Indoors, the product. When we talk about indoor GIS, it's also possible to start mapping and managing some of your facilities with either ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. And there's a couple of the configurable applications and templates that are out there, so you can get started and start mapping these things as well. And then we're also going to be talking about ArcGIS Indoors, specifically the product pushed out by Esri. And so this has a data model, tools to do the migration of your CAD information to the ArcGIS Indoors data model, as well as applications for mobile, for web, those kinds of experiences so that you can visualize and see all this information really easily in one spot. And so ArcGIS Indoors is going to be a bit of the focus for the webinar, but it's also fully encompasses more of this indoor GIS story. And so with that, really excited to have our first presenter and turn it over to Jade Freeman. He's been the GIS coordinator at MSU, and he's on the IT side. And he's been at MSU for over 20 years now, right, Jade?
Just about 20 years. In fact, in May was my 20th anniversary. So.
Oh, awesome. Well, congrats. In the middle of COVID, so you probably didn't have cake or anything. It was
No cake, but I got the pen.
Awesome. So yeah, really excited to have Jade here to kind of talk through his story and what they've been doing at MSU related to indoor GIS. So I just passed the control over to you, Jade, so you should be able to share your screen and kick it off.
Are you seeing my screen yet? Okay, good. So yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. As Brian said, I've been with Michigan State University for close to 20 years, even more if you count my time as a student. I'm one of those, I guess you'd call them a lifer. Graduated from MSU with a degree in construction management in 2000 and just never left. It's been a great place to work, and continuous challenges and technology and tools to play with and customers to work with. So it's been a great journey. Anyhow, what I wanted to talk to you today about was, sort of our journey, and where we came, and sort of I want to start out by this quote from one of our maintenance supervisors that had approached me in the hallway one day and basically was describing this problem he was having. He had a second shift crew. They were mostly young guys, new to campus. And campus is a big place, right? Just our East Lansing campus alone, 560 some buildings, roughly 5,300 acres. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but we're mapping all of our maintained assets. In our inventory, there's about 61,000 of those. From our space inventory, we know there's approximately 55,000 spaces. So campus is a big place, and finding your way around can be a challenge. And it's particularly challenging because it's never about knowing where in the building you need to go. It's about knowing where you need to park, what door you should go in, how do you get to parking from wherever you're at, et cetera. So it's a big challenge, and I think what you'll see is that Indoors really starts to take us full circle back to this original quote. And I wish Rich was here today. He retired several years ago, but I think he'd be pretty excited about what we're seeing now. So again, as Brian alluded to in his opening, we've been doing GIS for a long time. When I started as a student, it was ink on Mylar. I was involved with the migration to CAD and then oversaw the eventual migration into a true GIS platform. So, roads, sidewalks, underground utilities, trees, lawn panels. We're mapping every lawn panel on campus, and tying that to drive operational decisions, litter bins, all those kinds of things. So we've been doing that for a long time. Here's another quote from one of our maintenance folks that I thought was pretty interesting, is that at some point we implemented this asset management system, primarily focused inside the building. But the problem was that, we essentially asked our frontline staff to divulge all their knowledge, which we then locked up in a system that they didn't have access to. And I think so some of our focus over the next several years that you'll see here in the next couple of slides has really been about unlocking that and making that information accessible to the frontline staff again. So at the time, as I said, we'd been doing, outside the building, but we wanted to fill in the picture inside the building. So sort of similar to the slide you saw in the beginning, we had a CAD department that are maintaining CAD floor plans. They're making changes to those all the time. So as much as it was about how do we take a floor plan, georeference it, get it into a geodatabase, publish it as a service, create a map, it was also about building a process to make sure that we could keep that up to date with really the minimal labor that we had. But eventually we figured that out. We also Also had to figure out sort of the security piece. How do we control access to information, particularly like floor plans? There was one side that said, hey, you can walk into a building and there's an emergency evacuation map posted right there in the building that has, room numbers, floor plan, some assets in the building, all kinds of information. And the other side was said, well, you can't put any information about a floor plan online. But eventually we settled on a policy that I think, takes a fair approach where limited information can be displayed publicly, but there's also an avenue for requesting access to more in-depth information. That's been an important part for us because it's really been the framework that we control access. But so now that we had the indoor base map, just like the outside world, once you have that part figured out, the next thing is, well, how can we leverage that? How do we map the trees and the hydrants and stuff of the outdoor world inside the building? And so we began looking at this effort to basically go through and start mapping all of the maintained assets across campus. And we knew from our inventory there's approximately 60,000 assets. We know that from the experience in the buildings that we've gone through to date that we're finding anywhere from 100 to 150 assets in each building that we didn't know about that wasn't in our inventory. And to date, we've mapped probably, this is a little bit outdated, but we probably mapped close to, over 30,000 assets at this point. The next thing was, how do we, again, unlock that information and make it accessible to staff? And so again, like Brian alluded to, there are applications that you can use today, whether it be in Arcgis Online, Arcgis Enterprise, or even, publishing your own services and using like Web App Builder. So we built an application using Web App Builder. We actually built two, one for our mapping team that were responsible for going through and doing this mapping and collection of information. And then another one that was really focused on the staff that needed to use that information. We also developed a training program to help train staff how to use that program. And in general, we were pretty excited. We thought, man, this is going to be great. Staff are going to have access to information. And this is kind of where some of the problems started to manifest themselves. Because what we found was really that application, while it worked great on a desktop, was really hard for our staff to use on a mobile phone. Our facilities group had implemented a program to roll out employer-provided devices to their entire workforce. So they've really invested in enabling frontline staff with the tools that they need to make better decisions in the field. And this was part of that effort. But what we found was that on a small screen, large dirty fingers in a mechanical room where maybe the Wi-Fi connection isn't so great, that user experience was maybe not as optimal as we thought it would be. So this is where, now we're looking at indoors. We're in a pilot phase with Esri. We've got an instance of Arcgis Enterprise deployed with the Indoors organizational capability, and we've stood up a couple of proof of concept applications at this point. From our perspective, I think one of the exciting things about Indoors is whether you're using the web app or the native iOS app or the native Android app, there's been a lot of focus put on the user experience. It's also about wayfinding. I didn't know this until recently, but our facilities group has partnered with our parking office to designate spots at loading docks for our facilities staff because they were spending too much time, driving around just looking for a parking spot. So you can imagine the thousands of trips that technicians make to buildings on a weekly basis, scaled up across the entire labor force, across the entire campus over the course of a year. Even just a couple of minutes ends up to being a lot of waste and process. And so, and it kind of goes back to the original quote, they don't know where to go, they don't know where to park, they don't know what door to go in, they don't know where in the building. And Indoors just kind of brings, I think, that all together. So how did we do it? So again, we did not start from the aspect of not having, an indoor mapping system. We'd already kind of done that. So our main focus was on how can we leverage that? You know, how do we leverage the investment we've already made into automating the update process, all the QA, QC processes that we have on top of that, to just populate the Indoors model. And so right now we're using a FME. This is a picture of our workbench that we're using, but I can basically run this and update the entire campus. And it runs in about, I don't know, probably about 10 minutes it'll take to update the entire campus. So it's been pretty phenomenal to be able to, you know, once we started to learn and understand the Indoors data model, to be able to build this process. And it was really actually not too difficult for us to build a process that just mapped our existing schema to the Indoors schema. And not only is it just the floor plan data, but we're also starting to look at use cases around integrating like our HR data. So Indoors has a people table, right? So we can bring in information from our HR system. In our HR system, people have an assigned work location, they have contact information, so we can populate that people model. You know, just simple wayfinding, like where do you get coffee? Where's the dorm? You know, some of these things have been handled already, but we just want to bring them into the Indoors data model. One of the most recent things that we're looking at is our parking database. So we're mapping, I think it's around 30,000 spaces across campus, parking spaces, and some of those spaces are designated for university vehicle use. So one of the things that we've done recently is created a new travel type within Indoors that is focused around a university vehicle. And so basically, depending on where you're at, it will always route through a university vehicle space. So it kind of answers that question of where do they park? And then from there, how do they get into the building? So hopefully I'll be able to demo that in a few minutes here.
Just FYI, Jade, your 5-minute warning.
Perfect. I'll skip over this. So we've modeled a lot of different use cases. We're really starting to target sort of our facilities folks. And so use cases around work orders, where are the work orders assigned to my crew, where are the work orders assigned to assets, where are the work orders assigned to me. You know, some of the future improvement areas, I talked about the wayfinding. You know, most of our technicians, they're not walking across campus. Out of the box, Indoors is highly focused on sort of walking as your means of getting around, but we've been able to extend that to include driving directions, or actually a multimodal transport, really, where you're first walking to your truck and then driving to a parking spot, and then from there into the building. Down the road, you know, one of the things that we need to look at is integration or customization. This is just a screenshot from our asset management application or our viewer application, but basically you can click on an asset and it'll go out, pull documents about that asset from our document management system, pull information about that asset from our asset management system, you know, warranty information, notes, extended attributes, all that kind of stuff. So how can we bring that into the Indoors platform as well? And so I'm gonna jump right in and show you, this is one of our Indoors applications or one of our Indoors maps. This one is sort of being targeted at our facilities folks. You know, if you haven't seen the Indoors interface, it's pretty slick. It's customizable, you can brand it. You know, one of the things you can do is start to explore. So I talked about, you know, these work orders. So here we're basically integrating work orders from our asset or our work management system, tying them to the spaces that they're located in, and being able to present that as a pretty quick list. So, you know, I can go pick a workspace here. We'll go look at this eye wash station dripping into sink. So great. One of the things I really like about Indoors is when you click on one of these work orders or categories in this Explore pane, notice that it's automatically turned on the appropriate floor plan. You know, we built a whole customized web widget to do this. You know, now this is out of the box. I can save this location. So maybe I know that I'm going to have to return to this a couple times. Now I can go back to my places. It'll not only be saved in my locations, but it'll also be my home location. So if I were to reload this, it's going to automatically zoom into that location. It's going to turn on the correct floor plan. And what I really like is now if I go look at, maybe I need to find mechanical rooms. So now that that is my home location, you'll see what happens here. Well, maybe I have to set this as my home location. Okay, there it goes. So you saw that it resorted the list. So basically now it's looking at mechanical rooms that are nearest that location. So, okay, here's a mechanical room. I can quickly get there. Maybe I need directions. So I'm going to start from the IPF building. And I don't want to walk. So by default, it's going to give me walking directions, but that's great. I need my truck because it's got my tools and my supply. So I'm going to actually pick university vehicle. And what you'll see is it changed. Okay, so so just like, you know, items in the Explore panel, you know, it's going to give me turn by turn. And this isn't perfect yet, but you can see here that you're entering the parking lot and there's a university vehicle space. So you can go from there. And now if I go over to the building, again, so here's the university vehicle parking space at my destination. And you can see there's, if that one happens to be full, there's some in the nearby vicinity that I can look at parking in. But once I get in, so I'll enter the food safety building. It's going to tell me to take the stairs up. And what I like too is, you know, when we start thinking about 3D and how to effectively display a 3D route through a building to a user, it's not trivial. And Arcgis Indoors does a great job. So now that, you know, it's told me to take the stairs up and it switched the floor plan to level 2, the outdoor, the portion of the route that was on the ground floor is now a dotted line, and the portion of the route that is on the floor, that my last floor here that I clicked on, is now a solid line. So just little things like that, I think, really start to bring this thing together. With that, I think I'm probably pretty close to my time, and I want to be respectful of others. So I appreciate your time, and I will turn it over to Brian.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jade. That's awesome. And thanks for the live demo. We were kind of joking prior to, you know, starting. It's always a little nerve-wracking to run through, you know, technology live without a video or something, but no, appreciate you doing the run through of what you guys set up. Awesome. Angie, are there any questions specific to kind of what Jade was just showing or talking about? Would love to grab one question from the audience right now.
Absolutely, yeah. So a couple of people are interested in knowing more about how the asset management system and the work orders are linked into Indoors.
Sure. So right now, our current asset management system sits on top of an Oracle database. So we are able to write essentially query layers, I guess you could think of them as, against that system. So now that we have our assets mapped, we can also like run a query to find all the work orders that are related to that asset. And essentially what we're doing is we're just using the location of the asset as the location of the work order. That gets published through an Arcgis server service, and then pulled into the map. And then in Indoors, we configure those categories on top of that layer.
Awesome. Thanks,
Fantastic.
Jade. Yeah, thank you, Angie. And if people have other, you know, technical or questions, want kind of follow up to have an in-depth conversation, the survey is the best place to just leave a comment and some notes, or, you know, if you want us to reach out about some of those questions, we can certainly, you know, connect on it. Again, Jade, thanks so much. I think that was awesome.
Perfect, thanks.
So without further ado, got Jim Nelson from Harvard. Jim's been at Harvard for over 21 years, over 20 years, correct? Right, Jim? And so Jim is the Director of Planning Resources at Harvard and has an awesome team behind him as well. And again, just really glad to have you here, Jim. And let me turn over the presenter role to you, and I'll let you show everybody your story.
Great. Thank you very much, Brian. Oops. All right, is that displaying okay?
Yeah, looks great.
All right. Now, 1 second here. Sorry about this. I've now got, I can't see my control for my PowerPoint. There we go. Okay. Thank you, Brian. So, yes, I'd like to actually start off with actually recognizing our indoors implementation team. Parvane Kosari, Giovanni Zambati, and Mike Reno make up our GIS group. And they're really the ones that have done just about all the work that I'll be showing. And I'm really grateful for the efforts they've put forward to make this implementation possible. Our group, the GIS group is within a group called Planning Resources, which I manage. The Planning Resources group is responsible for the university space system, the GIS system, as well as construction documentation. And in turn, we're in the Harvard Planning Office. So we're not in facilities, we're not in the IT department. We sit under physical planning, and that influences some of our approach to how we address GIS and also how we tend to use it. But we also provide services to the campus services side, the facility side, operations side as well. All right. Our story starts back in 2000. We've had an interactive, we started doing public-facing interactive maps since 2000. Back in 2000, we used Autodesk Map Guide. Our current map, which is at map.harvard.edu, was created the earliest version was created in 2007 using an Esri Java template. And it's basically just kind of evolved over time, making improvements as we were able to. This is just a simple screen capture of the site. And back in 2017, we were looking at this and saying, look, the technology's evolved. This site no longer has responsive design, so it doesn't work well on a phone or a tablet. We don't really actually know who's using the site. We don't know how people are coming to the site. And it's time for a refresh. So we started a process where we reviewed the site, and working with Google Analytics, Google Webmaster, we really were working to decipher, is anybody using the site? How are they coming to site? Who's using the site? You know, we'd use the build it and they will come perspective, and we really hadn't been tracking, you know, how useful is this site? What we found is that on average, we were getting about 4,000 unique visits a week. We found that when in the fall and in the spring, that when students returned to campus, we would get up to, our usage would peak out at about 3,000 unique visits per day. We also were able to track down, using Webmaster, we were able to track down how people got to the site. Were they searching for it? Were they being linked through emails, through newsletters? Were they coming from other Harvard websites or other websites outside of Harvard? So we can kind of create this map of who's using it, how they're getting there, and who they are. And not surprisingly, we found that our audience was comprised of students, staff, and obviously the public. So working with our old site, we went through a user experience review. So we went through a process where we sat down with students and staff and got their feedback about the existing website. You know, how did this work for them? What information would they rather see? Could they actually do the functionality that we thought was useful? Could they find it? Could they use it? And you know, up in the upper right here, there's an arrow pointing to this map layers. We found that staff that had been using this site for over a decade never knew you could click on that and find a whole bunch of additional information. And this really is one of the things we wanted to be very careful about as we implement maps, is that, you know, I imagine most people on this call today are GIS users, and they're familiar with GIS and they have a GIS background and they create maps. And we don't want to create maps for GIS users. We want to create maps that are accessible to everybody. And that's really a central theme to what I'm talking about today. Is it's all about access. So out of that process, we came up with a set of objectives. We wanted this site to serve students, staff, and the public. There was an interest in finding on-campus directions from one location to another. There was an interest in the site providing real-time data. It had to have responsive design. It had to provide access to our accurate accurate information about our services and our resources. It had to support accessibility on campus. Could you find the accessible routes? Could you find the accessible doors? And the site itself had to be digitally accessible. So we went through a review process of what was out there for technology. And we did land on implementing the new interactive map on the Indoors platform. And some of the things that helped us decide that was the responsive design and the fact that we could use the same platform to represent the campus in 3D as well as in 2D. Because when you look at, there are people that when they look at this map and they see Widener Library, that doesn't help them. It doesn't give them a context that how massive the building is, gives you a feel for the campus. This is really an important aspect of map making. We feel that in order for people to understand the sense of place, having a 3D representation of the campus is helpful to many people. All right, so first I want to talk about points of interest. So for us, the process that we had to go through is really kind of re-engineering our information that we had to think about before we could use points and lines and polygons and lots of different methods to clickable objects. And we had to kind of distill this down to points on a map that could provide the information about the services and resources that we have available. And these resources span a large number of audiences. So here's an example of public art on our campus, or I should say outdoor art, as well as here are the food locations. And every food location is a little different in terms of which audience. Is it for students? Is it for the public? Is it for just for affiliates of Harvard? So we had to really rethink how we thought about our information, and we had to restructure it so that it would fit inside the Indoors geodatabase. So another thing that our users wanted were directions and interior information. So we're not here to compete with Google. We're not trying to get people from the airport to a certain room inside a building. We're just focused initially on walking direction from one location to another. And so here's an example of moving from one room to another room across the campus. So not only did we have to generate networks that worked inside our buildings, we had to integrate those networks with our exterior network. All right. Now, Jade touched on issues about security and what gets shown on floor plans. And our initial release of our indoor site is actually not going to have the interiors because of Harvard's concern about security. But we did have worked with the security group to come up with a standard definition as to what a floor plan can and cannot have on it so that it can be made public. So we have the ability of going forward after we do our initial release of actually building up those spaces that are relatively public with public appropriate information. Now, it's not just enough for us to show people how to walk from one location to another. So I've circled, basically this is a walking route. What we've also done is worked with the Indoors platform to provide functionally accessible routes. So the ability to use accessible doorways, accessible pathways, the ramps outside buildings. If in terms of the previous image, if this building here, you can see the people are walking up the stairs under the functionally accessible route. Now they're using the elevator to access the 4th floor. So this ability to assist people with disabilities to navigate the campus was one of the key elements that we really needed to address. Okay, real-time data. This is where I think this gets fun. It's instead of having an app for the shuttles and an app for your dining hall, or maybe one mega app that has lots of different information on it, and you have to download each of these apps, you can just go to this web location, and in real time, you can see the shuttles moving around the campus. In real time, you can see at any given shuttle stop when the next shuttle is going to arrive. We've also done some integration with the, not only do we have the shuttles in real time, the Indoors application also has the ability of showing events. And this is something we really wanted to take advantage of. But when it came time to make this slide, it turns out with COVID, there are no events on campus. So we happened to have, when we made this slide, there happened to be one event with a physical location. So this is a little underwhelming in terms of identifying them. But it's also made us wonder, if we're going to provide event information, should we be doing something that highlights virtual events as well? All right. We also make available in the Boston area, there's something called Blue Bike, which is a bicycle sharing program. We can take their data feed and show which bikes, how many bikes are at a bike rack, how many docks are empty in real time. But you can imagine this could be anything. If you have meters, if you have parking counts coming in and out of the garage, anything that you could feed through GeoEvent, you could make available directly through this interface. So that's something we'll be pursuing further in the future. Okay. So we're looking to, so one of the cornerstones of launching this site has been, in addition to access to good information for our audiences, assisting people with disabilities with physical access. Harvard is very much committed also to looking at digital accessibility. So Harvard is committed to conforming with the Web Consortium's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines Level AA. So I want to say compliments to Esri, who's worked very closely with us on improving the Indoors product to meet this standard. So we're actually looking to launch publicly our new interactive map after the October release of the 10.8.1 patch, which will address some priority issues related to digital accessibility. And Esri's committed to do some additional improvements in the 10.9 release. So this is really one of the cornerstones for us in terms of being able to make sure people with visual impairments or physical impairments, whether they're temporary or permanent, are able to navigate, or hearing impairments can use a screen reader or can use a keyboard to navigate the site, and so forth. Where we intend to go with this is, you know, when I ran through this, Jade made this statement that it's ironic that we're talking about Indoors, but our initial release will have no indoor spaces on it. We will be looking to implement a secure facilities-oriented site where it'll be easier for us to display interior spaces. We're also interested in looking at some of the other capabilities that are related to Indoors, such as the Space Planner. The mobile apps for both the iPhone and the Android. There's IndoRS, which we looked at very briefly for thinking about COVID, people real-time tracking and the ability of doing interior navigation. So that's something we'll probably do some we'll do some testing with once we're maybe more physically on campus and we have people that we can do some testing with. But also we're looking at integration with Survey 123 as a way of providing feedback through the interface as people want to change or update data that may not have necessarily rights to change that data, but as a way of collecting feedback and assisting with our improvement and ongoing management of our data. And with that, again, I'm just going to close again with a quick thank you to the team that has actually made all the effort and really made this this a reality for us. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jim. I mean, that one thing or two things that really jump out at me, I love the comment, and it mirrors kind of what Jade said too at the beginning of that question of how people are engaging with the maps or engaging with the technology. And Jade, you had said, you know, mobility is, you know, I mean, how do people interact with maps and technology now? You're going to go to your phone. You need to use your phone, and it needs to work on your phone. And similar for your questions, Jim, on your side, it was, you know, we built this thing, but we don't even know who or how it's being used. And so I love that framework you guys put together for stepping back and saying, you know, what were the needs of users now with the way that they're using tech, the way that technology has changed in the last, you know, severely, obviously, in the last 5, 6, 7 years. But Angie, any specific questions pop up during Jim's presentation?
Yeah, so we have people interested in knowing more about the routing and the networks. So can you speak a little bit to how long it took to develop the walking network?
Okay, so that's a little hard to answer because we had pre-existing pedestrian networks that we had maintained. And I wish I had a statistic to say it's this many miles of pedestrian pathways. I don't have that. What I guess what I could comment on is the challenges we faced with integrating inside and outside networks. That we do have POIs that sit inside buildings like dining halls or AEDs, and we may not have it for, at least initially, we're not going to have an inside network for all our buildings. So we've had to kind of create fake networks inside our buildings so that people can actually get, you know, just on that one floor, we have to kind of create networks inside all of our buildings that are very simple so that when you're doing navigation, the person doesn't stop outside the window near that object. You can actually route all the way inside the building to that point of interest. So in terms of time frame, it was not simple. It's not easy. But we're really happy with where we've landed with this ability of, because when we create our pedestrian network, we identify all the locations where there are stairs. So that assists us with finding functionally accessible routes for individuals. And we also, since we're in the planning office, we can work very closely with the planners that do accessibility and support accessibility. So as pathways and doors are improved, we kind of have firsthand knowledge of where to make the changes for our network. This is constantly, like all of us know, this is constantly changing. It's constant upkeep. And that's what I got for an answer.
No, that's great. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. And I think same thing, if folks are interested, you know, we've got Rich on the line. We could have follow-up conversations or meetings or discussion on, you know, what it looks like to build a routable network. And, you know, depending on your campus size and, you know, obviously it all goes into the details of what you're trying to accomplish. You know, comparable to Jade, if you're trying to do a mixed modal with ADA compliance, right, you're going to start to reach a higher bar of complexity. If it's, you know, walking routes or, you know, if it's just driving directions between points, it's going to be a lot simpler. So, you know, just again, in the survey or via email, just reach out and let us know. And we can, you know, set up a conversation, let you see kind of how complex it might be. And Jim, thanks so much. That was great. So up next, I want to introduce Rich Simpson. Why can't I say the name Simpson? So Rich Simpson with Esri. He's a solution engineer on the Indoors team here. And he specifically helps support higher education as well. So has been working for a while to support, you know, higher education customers and knows, you know, intricately some of the needs in this market. So Rich, want to turn it over to you to go through some of the things that are kind of coming up and like what's new with Indoors. And I think he's got a couple of quick demonstrations to show.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Brian. Are you able to see my what's new screen?
Yep.
Awesome. So Jade and Jim, you guys have great applications, and I love that they kind of have a different folded dynamics, right? So I'm really interested in how Jade, you're really kind of configuring your application centered more around the facilities and the maintenance operations aspect of things. And Jim, the way you're focused on the more external and public facing applications, that's really great. And what it actually really leads into is some of the newest capabilities that we're working with right now to allow for you to kind of blend the both of those worlds together. And so in the newest applications that we have configured in the Arcgis Indoors world, we've now come up with a new templated application for space management and space planning. Powered by indoor maps, users can create these various space plans and can evaluate multiple different space scenarios across their entire campus. We're also able to make space moves to co-locate different teams, as well as defragmenting department space. I know that this was an issue when I was in college. It was looking at how our geography and planning department was separated across 2 different buildings. But with the Space Planner application, you can quickly find various different departments and then be able to consolidate them into one area and create that cohesive environment. And with the COVID-19 and looking at your return to the workplace, we've also started to configure office hotels as well as hot desks for this flexible seating and scheduling across the campus. And so if you're not familiar with these terms, that's okay. Just to give you a brief overview, hot desking is more based on an unassigned desk concept. But the execution is first come, first serve, right? So if any occupancy is an open space, they're welcome to claim it as their own. They can sit down, plug their laptop in, and set up to get to work, and no reservation is required. But that desk then becomes their desk for that day and that time. With hoteling, it's a little different. This involves more of a pre-booking and checking in system with a space manager to access the actual space. So this might be with an actual, it's similar to very similar to an actual hotel, right? And now occupants are able to submit reservation requests and actually access that system once a reservation has been confirmed, and details are automatically emailed to the worker or occupant or student in this case, right? And so if these changes needed to be reflected in other organizational systems, you can actually pull that information from the space planner and export it to be reused in a different way. And ultimately what this is doing is allowing campuses and organizations make better use of their existing space without making very expensive decisions in order to expand a building's footprint. And so this is what the space planner is looking like today. We wanted to show you what the workflow of an operations manager would be for defining hotel areas for students or staff to use. And in this scenario, we have 19 people that have not been assigned to an office space individually. They've been, they're working from home or working remotely. And we can designate these various different people and areas in this map office hoteling area. So we can assign these existing occupants as well as the 19 additional staff to an office hotel. By doing this, we can now create this workflow and call it, customer service, and we can give these team members a location so that they know where they're going to go when they're in this office space. So by selecting all of these individual hoteling areas, we can assign these to that hoteling application, and then we'll be able to actually access through the mobile application and select these for booking in reservation status, right? So the workflow of the space planner is just to define hotels and to assist staff with getting them there. But what we can do right now is then take a look at what the occupant experience would look like in order to actually book one of these hotels. And so this is a version of the Arcgis Indoors mobile application. And here we have a user that's going into the campus and needs to schedule the use of an office tomorrow. So they're gonna go in and schedule for tomorrow. And this is a quick access tool for hoteling that when clicked, they can define different space that they're looking for. So if it's a single office or a manager's office, they can select that and filter by different rooms in order to find out what's available for tomorrow. So here we've quickly found an office space that's available for tomorrow. We can zoom out and look and see where it's located and see where it's defined in that space. And then we're able to actually confirm that this is the space that we want. Once we've done that, we're gonna get a reservation. And once that reservation is done, it's gonna go up to our space manager who can then approve it. After that's been approved, we're going to get an email and said, yep, our request has been accepted. This is now my office space. I've been booked out for tomorrow. I can come and go at that designated time, and that can be my office space. So now it's just making it very simple to go ahead and book office space to work out of in the operations standpoint. So In addition to space planning and workspace reservation, our mobile applications also support meeting room booking through an integration with Office 365. Jim was touching briefly on the Events tab. So with an integration with Office 365, you can actually get an access to this on the mobile device and see where your next appointments are or meetings are or in classrooms. You can visualize these spaces across your entire campus, right? So with the use of the application, you can actually go in and book the nearest room to you or to the collective group. And what this is doing is essentially making the room booking process fast and easy, while also minimizing the travel time for attendees across the campus. So we can find a more centered meeting room for everybody to come to instead of making one person walk all the way across the entire campus to meet up. We're also seeing a number of education institutions that are investing into IoT devices in order to remotely monitor the status and conditions of their facilities. By integrating these IoT devices with indoor maps, users can spatially visualize these changing conditions. They can evaluate multiple different space scenarios with either real-time occupancy sensor or people counters. And as more customers are working with integrated building automation systems, we can make powerful decisions about your indoor space on a cyclic basis. This could be daily, weekly, monthly, or an annual basis as well. Ultimately, what this is doing is helping the organization make better use of the space in order to save money in the operations and cost of operating the facilities themselves. So here we have an indoor map that's remotely sensing the temperature of each unit throughout a building. And based on the parameters of a normal desired temperature, we can visually see changing temperature demand throughout a facility. So when we know that the normal standpoint that people are most comfortable with is between 70 and 72 degrees. So when we're looking at this, we can understand the demand that's being set by individual thermostats. So we can select through the floor picker and understand what the demand level is on the ground floor. We can understand what the demand is for on the first floor. And really by aggregating all of this data, we can determine the average temperature demand as occupants are trying to change the temperature on their climate control devices. And what we can do from here is understand, maybe who is in these spaces. If it's an individual office space, we can understand that maybe, it's a closed off infrastructure area, or if this is a conference room space, maybe we want to turn down the air conditioning in that area. It's just allowing you to make a better decision about how you're heating or cooling your space. And lastly, but definitely not least, at the 8.2 release of ArcGIS Online, Arcgis Indoors can now be purchased using ArcGIS Online. So yay, with all the same capabilities. So what this is going to do is help with implementing customers and getting started much faster. It's also going to help with organizations that don't necessarily have the staff or the skills or the hardware to manage or deploy an ArcGIS enterprise on a local server. We still support that, but we now have it available for ArcGIS Online. So really excited about that. So that's all I have to show as far as what's new, and I'm really excited to get some questions on some of the new capabilities.
Awesome, thanks so much, Rich. And as I said a couple of times throughout, if there's any questions or follow-up, specific to Rich or things you'd like to see, please just, put that in the survey or reach out to me via email or Rich, and we can, schedule a time and get back with you too. Thanks so much, Rich. Some of that stuff looks great. So I wanted to wrap quick, and then we have a couple minutes for Q&A at the end. Some of the key takeaways I had from this were really, indoors as part of that spatial glue, almost using the map construct and the applications to tie together, if it's on Jim's example, the calendar system, the event system, or from Jade's example, asset management, and these other, if it's ServiceNow tickets, these other disparate systems can now be tied together with Indoors to have that kind of common framework to be able to then get to that information. Internal versus external use cases. This is really about, Jade is really positioned first his internal audience for more asset management, and Jim and the folks at Harvard have looked at it more of that external use case of trying to get a map to, their audience of internal stakeholders, but then also the public as well. So there's use cases on both sides. internal resources or Esri assistance. Jade and Jim didn't, they didn't kind of pound the floor too much with the great work that they did, but both of them, in-house did a lot of the work kind of to stand this up in terms of the networking and the routing and standing up this tech. So it's certainly possible for you to do a lot of this stuff, on-premise, in-house. And if that scares you away, there's certainly the possibility to reach out and have Esri assist with certain aspects. And another key takeaway that I loved, from Jim and also from Jade's piece was this idea of kind of user experience testing, really just reaching out to your audience and seeing what the best framework, what the best solution is going to be to meet their needs. And so some of the resources briefly, so we've gone through 2 of our webinars in the series. In 3 weeks, you'll get an email for the 3rd one that's going to be coming up. Really excited. We'll have 2 universities again presenting, and it's going to be more around mobility and the ability to quickly get applications configured and the value that that can have for your organization. It's really about, you can get things built out in a day, a couple days, and it can have a ROI very quickly for you. And then the last one will be around utilities. So we have a website that has a number of the resources we've talked about that's available. We'll put the link in the chat if people want to get to this spot. If you're looking for other things, just let us know through the survey. So some of the actions, if you're curious about where do I start, what's my licensing, I'd like to get an indoors demonstration, please just reach out to your account manager, or you can see my email down at the bottom there. Just shoot me an email or through the survey, reach out and we'll get back to you. The Education Summit at the user conference, we just sent out a call for papers for this, and certainly we'd love to get more from the operations administrative side. So if you have a great concept or something that you're doing, let us know. That call for papers is open and we'd love to get you to speak and have a session. The Esri Imgis conference, you might not have heard about it or seen what this is, but it's a conference around utilities and infrastructure. It's really an infrastructure management conference now that has a fun IMGIS name attached to it. So it's AEC, transportation, utilities, and it's a 3-day long, webinar. It's all being done virtually. It's free to attend, so please, look that up and register for it. Again, any questions, issues, just shoot me an email directly, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And we're sending some resources, pages, links, etc., in the chat. If you're looking for resources, just jump to them there. And so again, thank you so much to everybody that was on this webinar. Thank you to Jim. Thank you to Jade. We've got about 2 minutes left for some Q&A. Angie, were there any big themes that kind of jumped out?
Yeah, I'd say the one common question has to do with bringing data in and maintaining data. So I think Jim, Jade, or Rich could address, did you have to change some workflows, develop new workflows to upkeep the data, or are there ETL tools that are part of Indoors that make it easy to bring Revit into the Indoors model?
A lot to unpack with that one. I would say, Jade, you want to go first? I know you've got kind of your tool set built out for bringing in changes, right?
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, our focus was really on leveraging our existing investment. We had been doing, indoor maps for a long time and using them to the basis for mapping assets and other things and starting to augment our wayfinding with it. So, the biggest stumbling block for me personally was just, at the time that I was reading the documentation on Esri's data model while waiting to get access to the actual tools, I was building out my own database that was hopefully compliant with the data model. And the documentation was changing rapidly. The platform's evolving rapidly right now. But I would say probably altogether, because we already had the information, it was about building an FME workflow. And that probably took, a couple of solid weeks altogether, spread out over the course of, several months to get something to a point where I could actually start publishing services. And then my first app was actually just using the freely available, you can find it on GitHub, but Esri's published a floor picker widget that leverages the Indoors data model. So that was sort of how I went about validating that my workflow was producing a compliant Indoors database. So I stood up a prototype application and then went from there. Probably the biggest piece that we've had to work on over the years is the indoor routing. Someone had asked about that. You know, we're similar to Esri's tools. We're doing it in FME, but you know, we're basically leveraging the underlying floor plan to auto-generate most of the Indoors route. The only stuff that we're maintaining by hand are generally transition features like doors, stairwells, elevators, etc. But for the most part, it's all plugged into our automation pipeline so that when our facilities group updates a floor plan, you know, it just gets fed into this pipeline that updates the floor plan, the routing, updates assets if they need to be updated, etc.
Awesome. Anything to add on to that, Jim or Rich?
Jade's way ahead of us.
Yeah, I think
Go ahead.
I definitely think you summed up a really good option there, Jade. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Jim.
And then Angie,
Yeah.
we're 2 minutes over. Is there any one last kind of quick question we could answer?
Sure. Rich, what kinds of analytics does Indoor support? I don't know, maybe that's not quick.
Yeah, that's so I mean it really depends on what you're trying to pull out. As far as analytics, we have access to integrating in any kind of Wi-Fi beacon and infrastructure to see where devices have been, and so that can really kind of help to drive those analytics as far as how many people counts are in an individual building. But it's really just integrating in that IoT technology, like I was mentioning before, to really get those analytics in the basis. Other than that, I think the real analytics that you can put into it is, cost and of time that you can put between, facilities, maintenance, operations crew getting to a work order, right? That, being able to derive an analysis and saying, I can fix this in half the time because I know where it is. And that's going to drive a number of cost ROI for your facilities.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that, not to overcomplicate it, but really, as Jim was doing with the bikes or temperatures or, shuttle, any information you feed into the data model, you could archive, you could start to visualize, you could start to, look at the historical changes, you could feed into dashboards, into insights. I mean, it's almost a little overwhelming because you could kind of do a lot of stuff with the information. So it really depends on kind of your use case. So with that, we're 3 minutes over time. Again, thank you everybody so much for the questions, for attending, for the videos, etc. We'll get those out soon. But Jim, Jade, Rich, thank you so much again, and everybody will see you in 3 weeks.